On this day in 1949, General Cariappa became India's first army chief, taking over command from the army from a British officer. It was an army that had just fought a war with Pakistan over Kashmir. But the army of today is very different. The last real war was in 1971. A whole generation of officers have never seen a war. That's if you don't count that border skirmish in Kargil. But they fought so much insurgency that they are veterans in combat. Despite that, there's still a question. Is the army too fixated on war? Army Day 2008, and as usual, the highlights of the parade are the tanks, missiles and heavy equipment that the army fights its wars with. The last time this equipment was actually used was in 1971, 36 years ago. In contrast are these men, India's foot soldiers. Since 1971, close to 10,000 of them have died, fighting insurgency and terrorism in J&K, the Northeast, in Sri Lanka and around the world as UN peacekeepers. But when it comes to spending, it's this that gets the bucks. Of the 42,000 crore rupees that India will spend on military procurement this year, the heavy equipment that is rarely used will consume about 85% of the money. The soldiers will get just 15%. The reason? The army sees insurgency and terrorism as a temporary diversion from its main job of fighting wars.
National borders become the primary role, but there is very much the secondary responsibility of the army to come and provide assistance in aid of civil power. Having said that, I would like to say that since the army is an instrument which is there, it is an instrument which should be viewed as an instrument of last resort.
But the reality of India is different today. Last June, Defence Minister A.K. Antony became the first government minister to publicly admit to an international audience that India's primary security threat was internal. For 17 years, the army has done just that in J&K and looks set to stay. The last three chiefs have consistently maintained that the situation is close to normal, but the troops must stay on.
Present situation, starting from 2004 onwards, has improved. However, it has not reached a level where we should go down to carrying out large-scale demilitarization, as has been talked about. I still maintain that we need to give it some time before going ahead with any kind of reduction of forces in Jammu and Kashmir.
And as Naxalism slowly spreads, defying the efforts of the CRPF and the state police forces, will the army be inevitably sucked in? It seems to be the only option. But the army points out that problems like Naxalism are the job of the police. The army is the weapon of last resort.
You have to look at the army as a weapon of last resort. It is your army. If you employ it as a weapon of first resort, you would find that you will not have sufficient amount to cater to all the problems. So therefore it has to be seen as a weapon of last resort, and if that be so, it is only logical that the state police, the central police forces, the CPOs are able to tackle this menace of Naxalism.
And so the big buck purchases of tanks and fighters and aircraft carriers continues, while the bulk of the army temporarily fights insurgency and terror in J&K and the Northeast. A fight that the army calls temporary, but which has already lasted decades and looks set to continue. NDTV Bureau Report.